Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if the Allies actually attacked Germany in 1939. As we all know, Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, and this is, for most of us, the start of World War II. We could argue that Japan already started World War II, or that Italy did it with its invasion of Ethiopia or Albania, or that the annexation of Austria was the start, or also where Czechoslovakia got split. Anyway, it's not that important. Germany invaded Poland and deployed almost 70 to 80% of its army against Poland. And additionally to that, they got the backing of the Soviets through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Poland was carved up from both sides, and after almost a month of heavy fighting, Poland was no more. Polish military tactics were set in such a way that if Germany chose to invade Poland, Poland would have different lines to fall back into, where they could hold out and wait for the Allies to attack. France and the UK were Polish allies, and the only thing that came out was a declaration of war and a small French offensive in the Saarland. France was betting on their Maginot Line, and that's probably why they were not truly or just half-heartedly invading Germany. While the UK and France in that regard as well, they were still angry at the Polish leadership from annexing parts of Czechoslovakia, Zaolzie, thus becoming accomplice of Germany. It's true that Poland did some shitty actions and threatened Czechoslovakia's independence and Lithuania as well, but still, the UK and France were officially allies to Poland and chose to not really intervene. Romania was even more helpful because some Poles they could escape through Romania, and even Hungary, while officially siding with Germany, didn't allow German troops to pass through their country. This point of history, well, is very much controversially discussed even nowadays. So what if all of that changed? What if the Allies actually attacked Germany in 1939? The first obvious thing is that we need to change the leadership in France. So let's imagine that some generals or officers, they actually decide to go more on the offensive, or that they actually have an idea that Germany doesn't have that many troops on the western border, and thus they would give up on the defensive idea and go for the offensive. They would bet that Germany would send almost all of their army in the Polish front, and they could thus really make a huge toll on the German side. The French army would make considerable gains, but we wouldn't see them doing fast and sudden gains. Because remember, this is not a blitzkrieg. The French, they would be cautious, but still they would advance somewhat fast, or faster than one may actually think. And of course, their military strategy wouldn't just change overnight, but with the information that they would have that the Germans actually had like 70 or 80% of the troops in Poland, well, this would make them rather confident, and the morale would also be very high. They would also not have the possibility to send all of their troops on the German front, because they would need to guard their border with Italy. The UK would see themselves now forced to help out and send some token troops and perhaps even some bigger divisions. They would have the option to land very close to Oldenburg, Bremen, Frisia, Friesland, or join the French allies and advance through the Rhineland and Baden-Württemberg. What would the situation of the Polish front be like? First of all, the morale of the Polish army would be much higher in this timeline. This means that the Poles could effectively resist much longer, knowing that the Allies came to their aid. There would be more damage dealt against the Germans as well. Additionally, the Germans would have to redeploy some of their soldiers, tanks, equipment, more money would get lost, more oil would be used, because they would need to redeploy them on the western front, and still taking up all of that distance, well, the Germans, they would need to spend a lot on oil, which they were lacking, severely lacking. The Germans would now find themselves in the two-front war. Hitler would get very angry, of course, and he would make many of his generals responsible for it. But other Nazi party members, they would actually make him responsible for it, as would the Wehrmacht as well. And there's a chance that Germany might end up in a civil war, or we would have some chaos going on, or at least a weakened leadership. The Germans would not be beaten instantly, because they were, after all, a very strong country, had a very good army, and I don't think that it would just be done within a few months. It could take maybe a year, or maybe even 2 years, or even 3 if the Germans were really fanatically resisting. The next question we have to ask ourselves is, how would the Soviets react to this? The Soviets would probably, with Germany already being weakened or gone, not have the option to invade Eastern Poland. The Allies, they were also more active in this alternate timeline, and the Soviets would not want to risk anything. They could not risk a war with the Allies, and Stalin was cautious, wanting to get easy gains. Remember, Stalin was a leader who was very calculating, and he only made this pact with Hitler to gain some time. The Soviets, they were not in the shape to just attack stronger countries or be in a war against the Allies. Yes, they could take parts of Poland, but only with a joint German invasion, or they could also just invade smaller countries, but now that the whole situation changed, they would probably not even do that. Stalin also only attacked Poland after some days, where in our timeline the Germans already attacked, and he would only take those parts behind the so-called Curzon line, a line that was accepted initially by Britain and France. With Germany out of the picture, I don't think that the Soviets would do anything crazy in Europe. Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Romania would thus not face a Soviet invasion. Czechoslovakia would be re-established, and Hungary would also lose their territories which they have recently added. Italy in this timeline would probably seek better relations with Spain, Portugal for instance, and even try to get on the good side of France and the UK, and maybe they could get something out of Yugoslavia, but I don't think so. Austria would be again independent, and Italy would then try to act once more, or assume once more, the role of Austria's protector, because I don't see Austria getting like some kind of alliance with France or the UK, and they would thus be isolated, and Italy could just fill that gap. I could also see more Polish initiatives going on. Gaining confidence from defeating Germany, Poland may want to try to assume once more a leading role in Eastern Europe with the Międzymorze. This time around, it could have more success. Finland, Estonia, Romania and Hungary would probably be more willing to join. Finland would be willing because they were still afraid of a Soviet invasion, and seeing how the Poles were able to defeat the Germans would make them somewhat confident. Estonia too would be in a similar position as Finland, only that they would not border with Poland and thus have not really any objections to work with the Poles together. Romania too would actually like to deepen the relations that they had, and Hungary would also be facing some type of isolationism, and thus doing something with the Poles would be something that they could accept. I think that Latvia would be lukewarm to it, not really wanting to join this Polish initiative, but at the end they would end up to do so anyway, while Lithuania and Czechoslovakia, they may initially refuse it, but perhaps if the UK and France would see the USSR as a threat and communism as well, they would try to somehow make initiatives or talks between the Poles, the Lithuanians, the Czechoslovaks, and see if all of them could agree on some kind of partnership. Japan too may become a very, very temporarily ally to the Poles, but they would probably face small losses and get beaten much faster in this timeline due to the Germans already being taken out, and if the attack on Pearl Harbor would still happen, well, Japan would be going down even faster. Why am I saying this? Well, it's first of all because the Japanese, they invaded not only, of course, China or other parts, but they were also going to Indochina, Indonesia, and also other parts like Malaysia, for instance, until India even. And without having a huge German invasion all over Europe, we would still have more French troops in Vietnam, we would have more Dutch troops in Indonesia, we would have more concentration of British troops as well, and it would just be impossible for Japan to just take everything out in there. At the end, Germany and Japan would still get a very harsh punishment. I don't think it would be the same as in OTL, but we could see different types of punishments like huge obligations to pay or other things. The Allies, Poland and the Międzymorze, as well as the US, may try to encircle the Soviets and later on China as well. Communism would be the biggest enemy, and even powers such as Italy, Spain and Portugal may be part of a global alliance against communism. Decolonization would happen at a very slow pace, and we may even see a shorter Cold War in this timeline, while fascism would still be a very viable political alternative. And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.